Welcome once again, my fellow manipulators of digital fate. I'm Richie, this is Capricorn, and we are back at it with spoiler season for Magic the Gathering's Edge of Eternity's expansion. This is day one, but they dropped so many cards on us today that I had to split it up into two videos. So I did a video earlier covering everything that they spoiled in the actual official debut, and this video is covering all of the rest of the spoilers that dropped since then on day one, so that after watching this video, you can be confident there are no more spoilers that came out on day one on Tuesday. Everything has been accounted for. If you did miss that initial video, make sure to check it out, as well as a ton of leaked spoiler videos that I've put up over the course of the last week or so. A ton of cards got leaked, and most of those cards have still not officially been spoiled, but we did do a bunch of videos covering all of those cards, and those videos are available to you guys right now, so check that out. All of that's available in my spoiler playlist for Edge of Eternities, which I am linking in the description and in the comments. Check all that stuff out to get caught up, because this set is looking wild. But without further ado, we're going to dive in. Please like the video. It helps me get it out to so many more people. It helps the channel grow, and I appreciate it more than I can even explain to you. Also subscribe if you're new, because you'll never miss a video and you'll never miss a spoiler. I'm going to get this stuff out to you as soon as I possibly can, every single time new stuff drops. So you're in the right place. Hit subscribe. Now let's dive in. First of all, we've got Banishing Light. This should be no surprise. It seems like they reprint this card in pretty much every set. 3 mana for enchantment, exile a non-land permanent. It's the bread and butter of common white removal. You're going to play it in limited, and that's about it. Next up, we've got Mechanizoa, a 5/5 artifact creature robot jellyfish for 6 mana, 2 blue and 4, but it warps for 1 blue and 2. And why would you want to warp it? Because when this creature enters, you get to tap target artifact or creature an opponent controls and put a stun counter on it. Now, this isn't the most efficient piece of removal ever. It is just a common though, so I think it is somewhat valuable. While you're curving out earlier in the game, you get to warp it, lock their creature down for a turn or two, or maybe a problematic artifact depending on the situation. You could even stun a spacecraft that hasn't been turned into a creature yet, in anticipation of maybe they're going to turn it into a creature next turn and swing for big damage. Now they don't have the ability to do it, which is nice. And then after you warp it, it just sits in exile, so that later you can actually get the 5/5 body, get the ability all over again. It still feels pretty good. It's a little expensive because it's a common, but even at common, it has a ton of value, and it reminds me a lot of the adventure mechanic, to be completely honest. You get some value now, you do a thing now, and then later on you can play the card from exile. Next up, we've got Red Tiger Meccan. This is an artifact creature robot cat for 1 red and 3. It's a 3/3 with haste, but it warps for just 1 red and 1, which is kind of interesting. You can slam it down for 2 mana, swing in immediately for 3, and then it goes into exile, and then later on when you're out of gas, you have nothing better to spend your mana on, you just pay 4, smack it in, it swings in for 3 again as soon as you play it, and it sits on the battlefield forever at that point. So as a common, honestly not that bad. It's obviously a bit overcosted for what it's doing, but it's a common, so you kind of have to expect that. Another thing that's cool about it is it just counts as an artifact, and this set seems to care an awful lot about artifacts, which some of the cards we'll get to later will point out. You can also just warp it in and use it to station your spacecraft, which is cool as well. I just like that it's a robot cat. Voltron, anybody? But let's move on. Next up, we've got Insatiable Skitter Maw. This is a 2/2 insect horror with menace for 1 black and 2, and it has the void ability. So at the beginning of your end step, if a non-land permanent left the battlefield this turn, or a spell was warped this turn, you put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. I love how the void can trigger every single turn and just make this bigger and bigger and bigger. I actually think this is a really good common, like 4 common at least. It's not anything to write home about in comparison to, you know, uncommons or higher. But as a common, a 2/2 menace that's only going to get bigger as the game goes on, even if you're not super deep into a deck that can trigger void consistently, you know, whether it's you're removing your opponent's stuff to trigger it, or you're sacrificing your own stuff to trigger it, or you're playing a lot of warp creatures to trigger it. A lot of different things can trigger it, and like I said, even if you're not super deep into building around those concepts, it's probably just going to incidentally get triggered a few times throughout the course of a game and eventually become a 4/4, 5/5 menace creature that you still only ever paid 3 for. So in the right decks, I think this is really good. Even if it's not in just the right decks, I still think this could be like your 22nd, 23rd card to help round out your curve. I don't think this is nearly as bad as it might look on the surface. I wonder how people are going to take this card. But next up, we've got Shattered Wings. Obviously a play on words with Broken Wings, and it does something very similar. This is a sorcery for 1 green and 2. You destroy target artifact, enchantment, or creature with flying, but you also get to surveil 1. So this is kind of just Broken Wings with upside, although I think Broken Wings might have been an instant. I can't remember. Let me know in the comments if it was. If that's the case, then it's sort of not an upgrade or a downgrade, but a side grade. Instead of instant speed, you got Surveil 1, and you're probably only ever using this in limited anyway, so the instant speed doesn't matter nearly as much as it would in a constructed format. That being said, it still might be better than the Surveil 1. It's kind of hard to say, but Surveil 1's not nothing, so it's definitely a welcome addition. Next up, we've got Chrome Companion, our first colorless card of the day. This is a 2/1 artifact creature dog for 2 colorless mana, and whenever this creature becomes tapped, you gain a life. You can also pay 2 mana, tap it, put a card from a graveyard on the bottom of its owner's library. Really interesting card. It still has 2 power, so it trades okay with other 2-drops. More importantly, every time you use this to station a spacecraft, you don't even have to put the dog at risk, and you're still gaining a life, which honestly might help you win the race against other limited aggro decks. I don't expect this card to be used anywhere other than limited, but in limited, I actually think it's kind of okay, and I think the deeper that you are into spacecraft or things that need to be stationed, the better this card becomes, and the fact that you have this extra incidental ability to just get rid of problems in the graveyard, if something in the graveyard ends up being a problem, is kind of nice gravy. So, I don't know, I think in the right deck, this could be a welcome inclusion in your limited deck. It's not going to make the cut in everything. Next up, we've got Decode Transmissions, a sorcery for 1 black and 2. You draw 2 cards and lose 2 life. We basically see a version of this card for limited at the common rarity in every set, but the kicker here is in this set, it has the Void ability. So if a non-land permanent left the battlefield this turn, or a spell was warped this turn, instead you draw 2 cards and each opponent loses 2 life. So it's almost like a Unholy Annex version of this draw 2 cards, lose 2 life. For that one turn, and instead of casting this and losing 2 life, you're gonna make them lose 2 life. So it's like you keep 2 life and they lose 2. It's kind of like a 4 life swing in a way, and you're still drawing the 2 cards no matter what. It's also worth pointing out, I'm not going to point this out every time, but I am going to mention it now, that you can trigger Void with your own stuff or with your opponent's stuff. So even if you don't have a way to sacrifice your own dudes, or you didn't lose a guy in combat, or you don't have a way to warp something, you could still trigger Void by your opponent warping something, or your opponent, losing one of their things, or using removal on one of your opponent's creatures and killing it and triggering the Void. So there is a lot of versatility to how you can trigger Void, and as we get deeper into spoiler season, it does seem like Void is showing up on a good number of cards, and that's kind of exciting. I really want to try to build around this and really make Void work as an archetype, and maybe that's possible? We'll have to wait and see. But next up, we've got Worm Wall Sweeper. I think this is the last common of the day. A 2/2 artifact spacecraft for just 2 colorless mana. When it enters, you surveil 2, and then when it stations up to 4+ charge counters, it turns into the 2/2 flyer. 2/2 with flying. Honestly, not awful for a common. It's definitely not great. You have to invest a good amount just to turn this into a body that's as big as what the cost should be to begin with, which isn't super good. But at the end of the day, it is a common. It's a 2/2 flyer at common that you can put in any limited deck. So, to fill in a curve, you could do a lot worse. Evasion tends to be really, really good in limited, especially in limited over other formats. So the fact that this is a flyer that can go in literally any deck is not nothing, and it does get you a little bit of extra value along the way with that surveil. So it could end up being worth playing. If it is, it's probably that 22nd, 23rd card you put in to kind of round out your curve. Although artifacts are being pushed pretty heavy in this set, so there is a chance that maybe this is worth playing just because it gets you wider with artifacts for other synergies you might be working up to. It's hard to say. We won't know for sure until we see the entire set spoiled, but there's at least some potential with this card. Next up, we have our first uncommon of the day. This is Emergency Eject, an instant for 1 white and 2. Destroy target non-land permanent. Its controller creates a lander token. This is pretty interesting. We've seen versions of this card in the past where the owner gets a 1/1 creature instead of a lander token, and it's hard to say which is better. I think if you're up against aggro, this is probably better, whereas if you're up against a control deck, giving them the 1/1 body is probably better. So I think it's kind of a toss-up. Certain cards are better in certain situations, but I do like seeing like a different twist on this sort of a card. The lander token is not nothing. Being able to sack it to get any land, any basic land, and only costing colorless mana to do so means that literally any deck can fix their mana base with that lander token. So you are going to have to be really careful when you use this card that you're not setting your opponent up to play some bomb that is in their splash color that they just don't have the colors for yet. Very, very interesting. I think it creates a lot of gameplay decisions because of that. It should be pretty fun and limited. But next up, we have our next uncommon. This is a card that we actually saw in one of the leaked videos that I put up earlier in the week. So we've known about this card for a little bit. I think it was the actual first warp card we saw outside of the Eldrazi that got spoiled. Anyway, this is a 2/2 Drix Warlock with haste for 2 black mana. You may cast it from your graveyard using its warp ability, and it warps for just 1 black mana and paying 2 life. So you can warp it in for 1, swing for 2 with haste, and then it goes into exile. Then you can play it from exile for 2, swing in for 2 with haste, and then if it dies, you warp it from your graveyard again, swing in for 2 with haste, it goes into exile, rinse and repeat. It's kind of hard to really get rid of it, although you do end up having to pay a total of 3 mana and 2 life over the course of 2 turns to finally get this to just stick to the battlefield. But they are potentially losing up to 4 life themselves over the course of those 2 turns and that 3 mana. So in an aggro deck, it could be really cool. It's also worth noting that you're not limited to warping this only once a turn. So in a sacrifice deck, you could theoretically warp this from the graveyard, sack it, warp it from the graveyard, sack it. For every black mana and every 2 life you can spend, just keep doing that over and over and over again and generating whatever kind of sacrifice value you can. Maybe you've got creatures in play that gain you a life every time a creature enters and you're gaining back some of the life that you're paying. Maybe if you can gain 3 life every time a creature enters, you're actually netting a life every single time. There's a lot of potential for doing ridiculous shenanigans like that, and I'm going to be excited to brew around this card with something like that in mind. I think it's a really cool card that you really have to think about to try and get the most value out of it. Next up, we've got Youocial Engineering. This is an enchantment for 2 green and 3. It has a landfall ability. Whenever a land you control enters, you create a 2/2 colorless robot artifact creature token, and then it warps for 1 green and 1. So this is kind of interesting. Obviously, you want to play it for its full cost and let it stay out forever so that you can just keep making robots every time you play a land without having to spend any mana, which would be wonderful. But it's cool that it has the warp ability, right? You could go turn 3, warp this in before playing your land, and then get a 2/2. And it's like you spent 2 mana to get a 2/2 off a thing that's also going to give you extra value later. In that way, it sort of feels like an adventure creature, where the adventure was a 2 mana sorcery that made you a 2/2, and then you have this enchantment to play from exile later on like the card side of it. That's kind of interesting. I like when you really think about how these cards are going to function. And you really think about how you can build around them to take advantage of their strengths and to mitigate their weaknesses, they become so much more interesting. They really remind me of like a fixed adventure mechanic kind of combined with Evoke, and I really like that. You could also just, play this on turn 3 and then play like Fabled Passage, crack the Fabled Passage, put another land into play. Then you've got 2 2/2s, and you only spent 2 mana. You have 2 mana left to play another 2-drop. that could be a really cool line as well, and you still have the 5-drop that you can get value off later on. So I think there is a lot of potential in this card. I don't really know if it's quite going to be good enough for Constructed. 5 mana is a lot to finally hardcast this thing, but the potential's there, and I think in the right limited archetypes, it's going to be really, really good. But next up, we've got Void Forged Titan, a 5/4 artifact creature robot warrior for 1 black and 4. So 5/4 for 5. And it has the Void ability, so at the beginning of your end step, if a non-land permanent left the battlefield, or you warped a spell, you draw a card and lose a life. At the end of every turn, you just draw a card and lose a life. This feels a little bit like a poor man's Unholy Annex, because for the same mana that you would normally pay to get the 6/6 demon, and turn on the ability to draw a card without losing too much life, you get a 5/4, and you could potentially draw a card and only lose 1 life. It's significantly worse than Unholy Annex, but it still is kind of like a cool parallel, at least as far as limited is concerned. If you're running this in the right deck that can sacrifice things consistently, warp cards out onto the battlefield consistently, you can potentially draw an extra card every single turn, tacked onto a body that's actually not nothing in limited. And if this was, you know, seeing play in Constructed, in Standard, or whatever, that 5/4 body would kind of be a detriment. But in Limited, I feel like it's actually a bonus. Getting a big 5/4 beater that's also potentially drawing you a card every single turn in the same card, like tacked onto your Phyrexian Arena, seems better for Limited. They're going to run out of removal eventually, probably before you play your 5-drop, hopefully. And you should be able to draw a bunch of cards off this if you're building around it properly and still have something that can swing in every turn, or at least block somewhat effectively. So really cool, and it's an artifact, lots of artifact synergies. This card kind of has a lot going for it. I really like it. But next up, we've got Weftstalker Ardent, a 2/3 Drix Artificer for 1 red and 2. It warps for just 1 red mana, and whenever another creature or artifact you control enters, this creature deals 1 damage to each opponent. So you can warp this out for 1, and then just, I don't know, use your Planeswalker loyalty abilities, play a bunch of 1-mana dorks, get a bunch of triggers on this and do a bunch of damage, which seems really cool. And then later on, if you know, are out of better things to use your mana for, just spend 3 and have this ability forever, where you're not rushing to get as many creatures to hit the battlefield in the same turn anymore, because you don't have to worry about the warp ability kicking in at end of turn. So you can kind of take your time and get the rest of your creatures out and get maximum benefit on as many pings as possible. Seems like a really interesting build around, and hopefully we have some more cards that support an archetype like this in Limited, because I think it could be super fun to try to build around this specifically. In Constructed, there is a chance this is nuts, especially in the mobilized decks. Just warping this out for 1 mana, getting a whole bunch of pings, only having to pay 1 mana, and then still have value you can get later, could be right. Could be really good in just the right deck. Did I say could be right? It could be good. I'm clearly tired and need more coffee. We're going to finish the video first, though. I think this has potential. I don't know if it'll get there, at least in Constructed, but in Limited, it's definitely going to be great. Next up, we've got Siege Ship Impact. Siege Ship Impact. Maybe I need more than coffee. This is an instant for 1 green and 1. You destroy target artifact or enchantment. If its mana value is 2 or less, you create a lander token. This is really interesting. Not only does it give you a way to deal with all the problematic spacecraft that are going to pop up, but all of the other incidental artifacts and enchantments that are just seeming to completely take over this set, you're going to be able to get rid of. What I think is really cool about this is you could potentially use it to get rid of your opponent's lander token and then still get one yourself, which is really cheeky, really interesting, especially if you think that they're specifically making a lander token because they need to color fix for their splash color or whatever, and they're going to be really screwed out of a color if they don't get to keep it. If you can kind of recognize what's going on there and be able to use this to kill your opponent's lander token and get one of your own, you could see a whole lot of salt on the other side of the table. I think this is a really interesting card, specifically within this set, just because of how many targets this thing's going to have, and I actually think this is main deckable. It's super fun. I want to kill a lander token and then get my own lander token. That's awesome. Imagine how much they're gonna cry. They're gonna cry. Next up, we've got Bygone Colossus, a 9/9 artifact creature robot giant for 9 colorless mana, but it does warp for just 3, which seems kind of amazing when you take into account the fact that this thing can still station spacecraft when you warp it. And it's a good thing because it doesn't do much of anything else the turn it enters. I think this is the only warp card we've seen that doesn't have some kind of ability that gives you value outside of just its body. But just its body can be good enough. If you're in a deck that has a high density of spacecraft, there's always going to be targets to station with this. For just 3 mana, this can come in and just completely station a spacecraft all by itself, or get one of those big bomby spacecraft that you need to, you know, put 12 into or whatever. Get that super close to becoming a spacecraft just for your 3 mana. And not only that, it is still an exile later, and even though it's going to take you a long time to get to 9 colorless mana, although not as long as you'd think because of all the lander tokens floating around and all of the mana production, it seems, is in the mana base and in, you know, artifacts and stuff. It's actually not going to be as hard to get to 9 as you might think. But even if it was super hard to get to 9, it's still kind of just free value waiting to be cast at a later turn. When you finally get to enough mana and you're out of gas, it's just extra value you could then play as a 9/9 creature, which is not nothing. So in the right deck, I think this could be cool. You only want to play it if you have a high density of spacecraft, though. You absolutely need to be able to get value off this warp for this card to be worth running in your deck. So you're going to kind of have to build around that. But if you do, you can get a lot of value out of this, and I think it's a really interesting design. Next up, we have what I think is our last uncommon of the day. This is Sir Vondam the Lucent. We already saw one version of Sir Vondam that I think I covered in the past video, in the last video. This one is a 4/4 legendary human knight with Death Touch and Lifelink for 5 mana in the colors of Orzhov. That's a mouthful. Whenever Sir Vondam enters or attacks, other creatures you control get +1/+0 and gain Death Touch until end of turn. That's going to be really good in Limited. I don't think this guy is quite worth it in Constructed. He's just too expensive for what he does. The game's going to be most of the way over by the time you get to cast him. But I think in Limited, this guy is absolutely kind of nuts and probably worth building around. You know, if you get this pack, you know, pack 1, pick 2, or pick 3 or something like that, and you know you're going into Orzhov, you could build around this guy and make your deck kind of nuts. Everything getting +1/+0 and Death Touch, basically attacking with an entire board of Death Touchers, is kind of nuts. And even your crappy creatures, your 1/1s, get to double their power into 2/1s. So your opponent can't just let them through and it feel like not a big deal, because they're going to do basically double damage. And then some of your bigger creatures are even more threatening, obviously. They can do even more damage, but they've all got Death Touch no matter what. So this is actually really awesome, and the lifelink means that you can race your opponents. So even if they just take all the damage, thinking they can swing back, it's going to be really hard for them to actually race you, which is also really awesome. So I actually think this card is way better than it looks on the surface. I think most people are going to see this and think it's way too much mana, and you don't get enough bang for your buck. And in Constructed, I kind of agree, but in Limited, I actually think this guy's going to be really, really good. I don't think it's quite a first pick, but I think it's somewhat bordering on the edge of that, and I think you can absolutely build around this card and probably end up with a crazy deck. Yeah, this is just going to be great in Limited. Next up, we've got, before we get to the rares, a few of the bonus sheet cards. I believe this is the Stellar Sights bonus sheet. These are a bunch of, I'm pretty sure they're all colorless lands. They might not all be colorless. We've got 3 new ones to talk about in this video. First up, Blinkmoth Nexus is coming back. A land that taps for a colorless mana. You can also just pay 1 colorless to turn it into a 1/1 Blinkmoth artifact creature with flying until the end of turn, but it's still a land. You could also just pay 1 mana, tap it, target Blinkmoth creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. I highly doubt you're going to get multiple of these in the same draft. It is possible, but very unlikely. So that last ability, probably not super useful and Limited. But for those of you that want to use Blinkmoth Nexus in older formats, being able to get this new version with the cool new artwork is pretty rad. I'm glad this is in the set, and even just having like a colorless man land with evasion that you can kind of just splash into anything is going to be super fun and limited. But next up, we've got Thespian Stage, another land that taps for just a colorless mana. You can also pay 2, tap it to make it a copy of target land, except it keeps this ability. This card is going to be so much better in limited with some of the other mythic lands that we've already seen. There's one that's like a 𝐼𝐻𝐻𝐾𝐒, there's one that's like a 𝔼𝔻𝔼℉ Academy, there's one that lets you sack a creature to draw cards equal to the power. We've already seen a bunch of crazy mythic lands that are super powerful and do crazy things, and a few more of them are on the way. This could copy that in limited. If you're lucky enough to maybe like pack one, pick one of those lands, and then at some point see one of these bonus sheet cards passed your way, you could maybe grab it and potentially have 2 of the same crazy mythic land. That being said, it's not really... It's kind of hard to figure out exactly how good this would be in limited before we see the entire set spoiled, before we know all of the potential lands it could copy. And then obviously outside of limited, it's not going to be standard legal, but if you want this for some of your older decks, this is a new cool version you could get for that as well. And the last one here is Eldrazi Temple, a land that taps for a colorless, or it taps for 2 colorless if you only spend that mana to cast colorless Eldrazi spells or activate abilities of colorless Eldrazi. This being a bonus sheet card gives me hope. We've already seen one Eldrazi spoiled, and I've been wondering ever since if that's just going to be the one Eldrazi in the set, that they're just going to give us just this little tease, just one Eldrazi in the set, and nothing more. That's the one Eldrazi, which even if it is the only Eldrazi, just getting one at least, I'm still pretty happy about. But I'm really hoping we have more, at least maybe a cycle, one in each color or something like that. Well, not really in the color, they'd be devoid, but you know what I mean. I'm hoping we get a few more Eldrazi, at least in this set. It's safe to say we're probably not going to get any common or uncommon. The Eldrazi are definitely not going to be prevalent enough to show up there, because we would have seen more by now if that was the case. But I'm still holding out hope that there's maybe some more rare Eldrazi kicking around in this set. And seeing a card like this in the bonus sheet gives me more hope, because I don't think they would include this in the bonus sheet and have it be available to use in limited if there weren't at least a few Eldrazi to use it with, right? So maybe I'm just trying to convince myself because I don't want to give up hope yet, but I am hoping against hope that we at least get a cycle of Eldrazi in this set. And we have some more fun to play with in standard. I think that would be really cool. And this card at least makes me think there's still hope. I'm not giving up hope yet. Let me know if you agree with me in the comments. But we're going to move on. Next up, we have our first rare of today. That's Terminal Velocity. Or I shouldn't say today. The first rare of this video. Because we already did another video covering all of the debut cards in the official debut. If you haven't seen that yet, definitely check out the playlist that I have pinned. A lot of crazy cards were shown in that as well, and a lot more in the leaked videos. There's so much, guys. There's so much craziness out there. Definitely check it all out. But this one is Terminal Velocity, a sorcery for 2 red and 4. You may put an artifact or creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. That permanent gains haste, and when this permanent leaves the battlefield, it deals damage equal to its mana value to each creature, and at the beginning of your end step, sacrifice this permanent. Wow. Let me think about this. It gains when it leaves, it deals damage to each creature. And it also gains at the beginning of your end step, sacrifice the permanent. So, you jam out that colorless 9/9 we talked about. Immediately swing in for 9. And then at end of turn, you have to sacrifice it. But when it leaves, it deals 9 damage to all creatures and wipes the board. That could be pretty good. There's definitely going to be better creatures to use this with. That's just the first one that was on the top of my head because we just talked about it. But yeah, there's got to be some really, really crazy things you could do with this. It's worth noting that the creature is what deals the damage. So if you use this on a big lifelinker, like say an 𝐼𝐿𝐼, even though I'm pretty sure 𝐼𝐿𝐼 is rotating, you won't be able to do that in standard. But just for the sake of argument, let's say you did it with an 𝐼𝐿𝐼, you'd get the ETB ability of 𝐼𝐿𝐼, you'd get to refill your hand with a bunch of stuff, you'd get to swing in for 7, you'd gain 7 life because you swung in with a lifelinker, and then at end of turn, you would sacrifice it and it would deal 7 damage to each creature. And because it's technically it dealing the damage, for every creature you hit, you would gain 7 life. So yeah, if you use this on a lifelinker, you're going to gain an absolute metric ton of life. It's going to be ridiculous. You're going to get to sweep the board, you're going to get ETB value, you're going to get leaves the battlefield value, you're going to get to swing in. Like, this can do so much, but you definitely have to build your deck around it, and you definitely have to have very specific creatures in mind to use this with. Now the gears are turning. I've just read this right now for the first time, so I didn't come into this video thinking of, you know, what we could use with this, but there's got to be a ton of potential with this, right? If you have ideas about stuff that's not rotating out of standard, stuff that's still going to be in standard, that we can combine with this to do ridiculous, crazy things, definitely let me know in the comments, because I'm going to be looking to brew the craziest decks possible during early access. I don't exactly know what day early access is going to be yet. I know it's going to be on a Wednesday, but whenever that is, I am doing a 24-hour stream where we'll be putting as many crazy decks to the test as possible, and all of those decks will be going live on YouTube as deck techs as soon as possible. The first one always goes live that very day while I'm still doing the 24-hour stream, so we're going to have a lot to look forward to. And the reason I bring that up, coming full circle here, is let me know in the comments, guys. Come up with some crazy ideas. We're going to do some ridiculous stuff with this. I can feel it in my bones, and I'm super curious what you want to see. So let me know in the comments if you have a crazy idea, but let's move on to the next rare. Next up, we have 𝐼𝐿𝐼 Guided by Light. This is actually one of like the bundle pre-order bonuses on Arena, so some of you may have already seen this card. This is a 3/3 legendary human soldier for 1 white and 2. Whenever it or another creature or artifact you control enters, you gain a life, and at the beginning of your end step, you draw a card if you've gained 3 or more life this turn. It also warps for 1 white. So you could potentially play this on turn 3 for 1 white mana, and then play 2 other 1-drops. This will gain you a life when it enters, each of those 1-drops will gain you a life when they enter, and then at end of turn, you've gained 3 life, you draw a card, this gets exiled, but can still be played later on for 3 mana, at which point it will gain you another life, and it will stay as a 3/3, gaining you life for every creature that enters for the rest of the game, or at least until they kill it. I definitely think there's value to be had here. I think most people are going to see this card and think it's a crappier version of other creatures that kind of have a similar ability, but are way cheaper and can come out earlier. And you're not necessarily wrong, but there's a reason this is a rare. And I definitely feel like this is going to be a sleeper to some extent. I just don't know to what extent yet. I definitely think we're going to have to play with it and test it before we know for sure. But I do think there's a lot of potential, especially when you line up a card like this with something like Elspeth that can create tokens without spending mana, or really any way that a permanent has to create tokens without spending mana. You could get a ton of value, because for only 1 mana, you put this out, and then you're making all those tokens, gaining a bunch of life, at least drawing 1 card. There's a lot. There's a lot of potential for sure in this card. If you have ideas about how to get the most value out of it, let me know in the comments, because there's got to be stuff that I'm not thinking of for sure. I think this card is definitely going to be a sleeper. I think most people aren't going to think it's as good as it ends up being. The question is, how good is that really? Is it like good, or is it just good? We'll have to wait and see. Next up, we've got Emissary Escort. This is a 0/4 artifact creature robot soldier for 1 blue and 1. So it's a 0/4 for 2. But when this creature, this creature gets +X/+0, where X is the greatest mana value among other artifacts you control. So in any kind of a deck where you're ramping out big artifacts or cheating out a big artifact, maybe by using some kind of a reanimator card or something, this could get really crazy. This is definitely a rare for a reason, guys. This could be like a 7 power, 8 power, 9 power creature for only 2 mana in the right deck if you build around it just right. And I have a feeling that this is going to be efficient. It has to have the right cards paired with it in order for it to be efficient enough to actually use. But if you can jam this on 2 and then get something into play on turn 3 that has a much higher mana cost than a 3-drop should have, this could be really crazy on curve. You know, this could be like a 4/4, 5/4, 6/4. And like I said, if you can cheat something big into play, this could be like a 9/4 that still only ever costs you 2 mana. But what's cool about it is the power will scale as well. So even if you just play this on 2 and you play a normal 3-drop artifact on 3, this is still a 3/4 that only costs you 2 mana. And that's still good, right? That's already good. And then it only gets bigger as the game goes on and you play more expensive artifacts. So even if you're not cheating this and getting insane power right off the bat, it's kind of just fine on curve. Even if you don't have another artifact out yet in the turn that you play it, it's just a 0/4 blocker. That's not the worst ever either. Then you block, you stay alive, you slam a 3-drop artifact, you swing for 3 with something that only costs you 2 mana, and then it just gets bigger as the game goes on. Yeah, the more you think about this card, the better it is. I actually think this card is going to be one of the better cards for blue in the set. This seems nuts. This might go really well in like a prowess deck, if the prowess decks end up being very artifact synergy driven, which I guess they probably won't now that Corey Steelcutter is banned. This could end up being really good in synthesizer decks too. It's not a 3-drop, so it's not going to trigger your synthesizer, but you could do a lot worse when it comes to having something to play on too to bide your time until you get to your synthesizer. This is just going to get bigger as the game goes on if you build your deck right. Then again, synthesizer decks probably want a high threshold of 3 mana artifacts, and they don't want a bunch of expensive ones. So maybe it's not the best in that deck either. There's definitely going to be a home for this though, so if you have ideas about ways to make this crazy, definitely let me know in the comments. But even without making it crazy, I think it's just fine in a normal artifact deck. I really think it curves out pretty well. Yeah, I think the more I think about this card, the more I like it. But next up, we've got Sunset Saboteur. This is another card that we already saw leaked in one of the previous videos. There haven't been a ton of the leaked cards that have actually popped up in the official spoilers yet, but this is one of them. So a 4/1 human rogue with menace for just 1 black and 1. 2 mana for a 4/1 menace, which seems a little bit pushed. Then you notice it has ward discard a card, which makes it even more pushed. Why? Because it has a downside. Whenever this creature attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature and opponent controls. So you do have to put a counter on a creature and opponent controls. A couple of things I want to point out about this. First of all, if you target one of their creatures that has ward, you can then choose to not pay the ward cost, and the ability gets countered, and they don't get a counter. And that's up to you. You still technically targeted something, but the ward shut you down, which is kind of a cool way to use this. It's like an anti-ward card, which I kind of like. Also, if you just want to use the 4 power to station spacecraft or station some of the mythic lands, you don't have to ever worry about your opponent getting +1/+1 counters on their creatures, because you're not really attacking with it. And in a similar vein, if you're not attacking with it, you can hold it back to block. It's a really good blocker that can trade up, kill a 4 toughness creature, and only ever cost you 2. And if they want to be able to swing in with their like 5/4 or whatever, and this is in the way, and they have to remove it with removal, they're going to have to pay the ward and discard a card in order to do so. So there are a bunch of interesting ways you can use this card, and a lot of ways you can maybe build around it. I'm just super curious if the card ends up being good enough if you just use it like fairly the way it's intended as an aggressive card that's trying to, you know, be in a black X aggro deck and just get the opponent dead as quick as possible. Can we make it work? You are giving your opponent fuel to their fire to maybe win the race, but 4 power is an awful lot, especially with menace. So it's hard to tell. Let me know how you feel about it in the comments, because the jury's out in regards to using it that way. But I definitely think even if it doesn't end up being good enough that way, there are some ways you can use this that are going to be really great, and I can't wait to explore it. But next up, we've got Rust Harvester. This is a 1/1 robot with menace for 1 red mana. 1 red mana. I'm tired. I need food. I need coffee. My dog's snoring right next to me. Let's finish this video. A 1/1 artifact creature robot with menace for 1 red mana. You can pay 2 mana, tap it, exile an artifact from your own graveyard to put a +1/+1 counter on this creature, and then it deals damage equal to its power to any target. I kind of love this. It gives me like Cursed Scroll vibes, even though it's very different from Cursed Scroll and it's not really Cursed Scroll at the end of the day. I have a soft spot in my heart for Cursed Scroll. That's a card that we've not seen in a very, very long time. It was one of my first experiences with a permanent that could remove creatures once a turn, over and over, potentially, if you built your deck right around it. And this can do the same thing. What's cool is as you put more and more counters on it, it can kill bigger and bigger creatures. So you're starting to get more value for some of those missing artifacts in your graveyard. It's not like it's always dealing the 1 damage and you have to keep eating things. It just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And then eventually when you have no artifacts to eat in your graveyard, it's just a giant menace creature that can swing in and win you the game. Everything about this is awesome. I think this is going to be a tier 1 card. You're going to see it in a lot of decks. If there's an artifact creature deck, an artifact heavy like aggro deck, this is absolutely going to have a spot in it. As your creatures get picked off by your opponent's removal, you start to get, you know, fodder, gasoline for your Rust Harvester here. Not only can you make it bigger and kill their creatures, but if you want to, you can just use its ability to just do damage to the opponent's face. You can also take out a Planeswalker. There's actually a lot that this can do, and it's super versatile. Personally, I just love a cheap, efficient artifact that can repeatedly do damage to things every turn, just like Cursed Scroll. And I'm absolutely going to try to build around this. Whether it's in an Artifact Matters deck or just a crazy aggro deck, you're definitely going to want artifacts in your deck to some extent. But it'll be interesting to see how deep you actually need to go for this to be worthwhile. Maybe even if just half your cards are artifacts, that's enough to keep this thing fueled, and you can focus on being a super aggressive deck and not necessarily being entirely artifacts. Or maybe you have to go the artifact direction and really just build a complete and utter artifact tribal deck and still try to be as aggressive as possible with it. You could even just use this in sort of like a control deck where you're not trying to race your opponent down and just using this to remove threats every single turn. There's just a lot you can do with this, and I'm super excited to experiment with it. So if you have ideas about how this could be used, definitely let me know in the comments. I know one thing we're definitely going to have to do is Soul Cauldron with Rust Harvester so that all of our creatures with counters get the Rust Harvester ability. Oh god, that could be insane, right? Because if you put it on a big creature, you don't have to rely on a bunch of activations, a bunch of exiles to build up the counters to do a bunch of damage. You could just first activation of a really big creature, just do a bunch of damage right out of the gate, still get a counter. Seems awesome. There's a lot of potential with this one for sure, but we're going to move on. Next up, we've got Frenzied Baloth. This is another one that we actually saw leaked early in one of the other leak videos, which you guys have to check out those videos because there's a bunch of crazy stuff we haven't gone over yet in the official spoilers. This set's looking insane. But Frenzied Baloth is one of those cards. A 3/2 beast for just 2 green mana. It can't be countered. It has trample. It has haste. Creature spells you control can't be countered for as long as it's on the battlefield. And combat damage can't be prevented. Period, as long as it's out. That's not combat damage from him. That's combat damage from everything. This is the most pushed green card I've seen in so long. And I do think that mono green beatdown, mono green like mid-range might actually be able to come back in a meaningful way because of this card. I'm hoping so, man. There have been a couple cards here or there over the last handful of sets that have kind of pushed mono green mid-range into wanting to exist again. Mono green beatdown decks, if you will, but it hasn't quite been good enough yet. This might finally push it over the finish line. And if there's even more gas coming for mono green, then we're definitely there. We're definitely there. But even just this might be enough. I'm super excited to see what else is coming. This card is just nuts. This is a perfect example of how current standard is not power crept, it is power leapt. This is a power leap, guys. This is just insane. If you had shown this card to someone 10 years ago, they would have laughed and been 100% sure that it was fake. It is not fake. In fact, it's in standard. What a time to be alive. Next up, we've got Weapons Manufacturing. This is an enchantment for 1 red and 1. And whenever a non-token artifact you control enters, you create a colorless artifact token named Munitions, with when this token leaves the battlefield, it deals 2 damage to any target. Wow. So every artifact gives you 2 artifacts, and one of those artifacts is just something that sits there and does nothing, except when it leaves the battlefield, it deals 2 damage. I keep rubbing my nose. My allergies are awful right now. I promise it's not the other thing. I'm a good boy. I keep out of the mess. I'm a good boy. But this card's insane, man. This card is crazy. It's only 2 mana. Every single artifact makes double artifacts, which is gonna matter for like cards that care about going wide with artifacts, right? You're gonna have tons of sacrifice fodder, and half that sacrifice fodder is going to be something that you want to sacrifice. It doesn't do anything on the battlefield, and when you do sacrifice it, it shocks whatever you want. It can even shock the opponent's head. Everything about this seems crazy. We already saw a card in the last video I put out, a 2-drop that turns all of your artifacts into foods that can either be sacrificed like a food to just gain 3 life, or you can pay 1, tap that dude, and sacrifice an artifact to deal 3 damage to each opponent. If you do that with this out, you're spending 1 mana, sacrificing a Munitions to deal 3 damage to each opponent and 2 damage to whatever you want. 5 damage for 1 mana. And if you gain life during the turn, that guy that does that untaps. That's just one way to abuse this. There's definitely other ways to abuse this. There's that card called Food Fight, where all of your artifacts you can sacrifice to do damage, whatever. Anyway, I don't think that's standard legal. I think that was in, what set was that in? I forget. If you guys remember, let me know in the comments. But there's definitely going to be other ways to sacrifice artifacts. 𝔼𝑊 can sacrifice artifacts. Imagine just like getting this out early, playing a bunch of artifacts, and then out of nowhere you just drop 𝔼𝑊, sack everything, and just nuke your opponent in the face. That seems like it'll be really fun. You know what this card would be really sick with? If Nahiri's Resolve wasn't rotating, that would be nuts. All of the artifacts that you played to get Munitions tokens, you could flicker every turn and get even more Munitions tokens out of them. I suppose we could still potentially maybe use this in a flicker deck, though. Every single time we flicker an artifact, we get another Munitions token, which could be something. In fact, you could flicker the Munitions tokens themselves just to trigger the 2 damage, even though they won't come back. Man, if Nahiri's Resolve wasn't rotating, this card would be broken in that deck. That is crazy. But there might still be ways to get value off of this. Does Y'shtola Rule allow you to flicker artifacts or only creatures? I think she's only creatures. But if it's artifacts as well, she could be gross with this. Not only do you just automatically trigger all of your 2 damage munitions, but you flicker all your artifacts so that you replace all of those munitions with more munitions. Yeah. We're gonna have to look into that. I'm pretty sure she's only creatures though, which is kind of a bummer. But there's gotta be something. There's gotta be something that's standard legal that lets us flicker artifacts consistently, right? If you have ideas, let me know in the comments. I think there's potential for this card to be absolutely broken. This is just looking nuts to me. But next up, we've got Biotech Specialist, a 1/3 insect scientist for 2 mana in the colors of Gruul. When it enters, you create a lander token. So you're going to get free ramp, you're going to get 2 permanents for the price of 1. Honestly, kind of good for just 2 mana. Then it also has this other ability. Whenever you sacrifice an artifact, this creature deals 2 damage to target opponent. This gets crazy, man. This is crazy. You use this with the last card we were talking about, and every time you sack one of those musicians, you're doing 2 damage to whatever you want and do damage to your opponent. Jeez Louise. This is crazy. Is it just me or is this crazy? There is absolutely going to be an artifact deck that's tier 1 in standard. There might even be a couple different versions of artifact decks that are tier 1 in standard, because I think the 𝐼𝑐𝑒𝑟𝑟𝑎𝑛𝑐𝑒 Synthesizer deck is going to get there as well. And definitely some kind of a crazy go wide, sack, do a bunch of damage, ridiculous artifact aristocrats sort of deck. Man, there's just, I can't even think right now how to properly synergize with this and use it, but we are absolutely going to do it. Everything I said about that last card, for the most part, applies to this card. Well, not everything, but yeah, we're going to have some brewing on our hands for sure. If you have ideas about how to use this stuff, definitely let me know in the comments. I want to collect as many ideas as possible and make sure we go absolutely crazy during early access and make all of those ideas happen. So let me know in the comments. But next up, we've got Genemorph Imago. Pupper, be quiet. The pupper is excited. Hey, I'm trying to record a video. Apparently he doesn't like insect druids. Anyway, Genemorph Imago. Is it Imago or Lamago? That's a capital, so it's Imago. Quiet down, I'm trying to talk about the insect. This is a 1/3 insect druid with flying for 2 mana in the colors of Simic. And it has a landfall ability. Whenever a land you control enters, target creature has base power and toughness 3/3 until end of turn. But if you control 6 or more lands, that creature has base power and toughness 6/6 until end of turn instead. So once you get to 6 lands, every land that enters turns one of your creatures into a 6/6. That has to be good, right? There has to be a deck that utilizes this. We've seen a ton of different cards, not only that already exist in Standard, but that are coming in this set as well, that allow you to potentially put a whole bunch of lands onto the battlefield at the same time. If you could just get a whole bunch of landfall triggers and turn all of your little crappy dudes into 6/6s and Alpha Strike for the win, that could be really cool. It does seem like a lot of hoops to jump through. So at the end of the day, I'm not sure how good it is. It's one of those cards that, depending on what kind of support it gets, it could either be absolutely insane, where you get all these 6/6s without even having to cast spells just by dropping lands. At the same time, it could be too cute. It could be too many hoops to jump through, and maybe not good enough. We're really not going to know until the entire set is spoiled. Even then, we might have to test it before we really know for sure. But at least it has potential, right? Even the dog can see that. So, we're going to have to wait and see. But next up, we have the Eternity Elevator. This is another one that we actually saw in one of the leak videos. I forget which leak video. But this is a crazy card, man. 5 colorless mana for a legendary artifact spacecraft that can immediately tap for 3 colorless. That's the most important part to understand about this card, because 5 mana looks like a lot. But the fact that you can tap this for 3 mana right away and get 3 of that 5 right back to spend on another spell means functionally, if you build around it correctly and play it correctly, it's going to feel like it only costs you 2 mana to get out, which is kind of nuts, because then every turn after that, you can tap this thing for 3 mana. So it feels like it costs 2, but it taps for 3 every turn. It almost feels like a super Sol Ring. Feels like it costs 1 more than a Sol Ring and gives you 1 more than a Sol Ring. It is more than that. It's not quite that. It does cost the 5, right? But it's going to feel that way a lot of times. And then it has this station ability, where if you get to 20 plus charge counters on it by tapping creatures and stationing it every turn, it turns on this ability to just tap for X mana of any color, where X is the number of charge counters on it. So if you can somehow go wide with a bunch of creatures and station this thing up, all of a sudden it's tapping for 20 mana, 30 mana, 50 mana, who knows? And you can just absolutely... who knows what you can cast. You can cast anything. Out of nowhere, you're going to nuke your opponent's face. You're going to fill up the board with insane power. You're just going to go crazy, right? But even if you don't ever get to that 20 plus charge counters, I feel like this card is still really good. Like, you play this on turn 5, tap it, still play another spell that costs 3. And then on turn 6, you've got potentially 6 lands out plus this. You could play a 9-drop. And then you could still get more mana out of it every single turn after that. Even if you never get it stationed up to 20, it could be nuts. But I have a feeling there's definitely going to be some kind of crazy combo deck that gets this to 20 really easily. At the very least, you can run this in Simulacrum Synthesizer decks, and it's going to be Simulacrum Synthesizer's best friend. Comes down as a 5-drop, triggers the Synthesizer, gives you another big token, makes all of your other tokens bigger, taps for mana, lets you play another 3-drop right away to trigger the Synthesizer again, and then you just tap all those tokens to station this, and you can tap it for a ton of mana and just play out everything. Man, you're going to go so insanely wide with so much power and so much value so quick in Synthesizer decks now. It's going to be gnarly. And even with it being legendary, it's not completely useless, because you can tap it for mana. You know, if you get to the 20 plus charge counters, you could theoretically tap it for a bunch of mana and then play the other one, but use the mana to play a bunch of other stuff so that you're able to spend a bunch more tokens tapping and putting charge counters back on the new one, and then be able to use the new one to make X more mana and just kind of like keep the snowball going. That might be a little too cute. Maybe that's not super reliable, but at the very least, just using it the way it's intended is going to be nuts in Simulacrum Synthesizer decks, and it's probably going to be good enough to see play in other decks as well. I think this card's going to be really good. I have a feeling people are going to overlook it, and it's going to be a little bit of a sleeper at first, because I think people aren't going to realize that, hey, it doesn't enter tapped. You could use that mana right away, and that feels really, really good. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe people will realize how good it is right out of the gate, but we're going to have to wait to see. I think this card is just... This card's insane. This set is looking insane. This set is so pushed. It almost feels like they're worried that people won't take to the sci-fi theme and that they're veering too far away from fantasy, and they're trying to make up for it by just gassing up the power of these cards so that even people that aren't super into the flavor are in love with the mechanics and just have to use these cards in their decks anyway. Try and get the sci-fi theme over so that eventually down the line, if they have like a Star Wars Universes Beyond set or a Star Trek set or whatever, people are already more accustomed to it, and it's easier to kind of like bring a set like that in. Maybe I'm thinking too far ahead, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but just my thoughts I wanted to share before moving on. But next up, we've got Exingusher Battleship. Talk about pushed. This is an artifact spacecraft for 8 colorless mana, and when it enters, you destroy target non-creature permanent and do 4 damage to each creature. So it wipes the board of everything that's 4 toughness or less and gets rid of the most problematic non-creature permanent. If you use this just right, this could just stop Simulacrum Synthesizer decks, right? Nuke their Synthesizer, do 4 damage to each creature. You are going to have to maybe do a little bit more incidental damage to kill 1 or 2 of those tokens before the rest get low enough to then be wiped by the 4 damage. But if you can kill a couple of the tokens, get all the rest of the tokens down to 4, you can just wipe the board with all of this. That might be kind of tricky. You know, usually those decks have a bunch of artifacts they've already gone wide with, where it's going to be hard to get them down to 4 toughness. So maybe not necessarily against that, but either way, doing 4 damage to every creature and killing the worst non-creature permanent is kind of good enough as it is, and we've already seen a ton of ramp to get this guy out way earlier than you would expect. It's going to be very rare that this 8-drop feels like an 8-drop. You're going to either cheat it out or ramp to it or whatever. And this is just another card that continues to show how they're pushing for colorless decks to be a real thing with like Ugin and stuff in the mix. But it doesn't stop there, because this thing has station, and it only needs to be stationed to 5+ counters. That's it. 5+ charge counters, and it becomes a 10/10 flying trample. And what's cool about this is you can play it out, nuke the board, kill their problematic permanent, and then not station it right away so that they can't kill it with creature removal. And then on your next turn, you could play a creature that's 5 power or more, immediately tap that creature to station this thing, and then because this doesn't have summoning sickness anymore, even though it wasn't a creature before, it still started the turn in play for you. It won't have summoning sickness and can immediately swing in for 10 in the air with trample, and you successfully avoided any sweepers your opponent might have or any sorcery speed removal. There's just a lot you can do with this card. 8 mana is a lot, but again, I don't think 8 mana is going to be as much as it might seem like it is right now because of the lander tokens, because of all of the ramp we're getting, and because of so many ways to cheat out cards like this in the current standard, and even in new cards that are coming in this set to the new standard. So I think this card could just absolutely be nuts, and definitely better than I think most people are going to give it credit for. I think most people are going to see that 8 mana and just think it's way too expensive, and not realize that that 8 mana is going to feel a lot more like 7 or maybe even 6 mana in the new standard. This card's just crazy. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Let me know what we should pair it with, what kind of deck we should build around it for sure, because I think this one has ridiculous potential. But next up, we've got Singularity Rupture, a sorcery for 6 mana in the colors of Dimir, and it destroys all creatures and then any number of target players, each mill half their library rounded down. As if the mill decks needed any more gas, now they have a sweeper that makes it so you don't have to slow down on your mill strategy, right? We're seeing a lot of sweepers in this set, and we're also seeing a lot of support for mill, especially on the heels of the Final Fantasy set, where we already saw a bunch of mill cards. Having a sweeper, which granted it's too expensive to play on curve. This isn't going to be like your turn 4 like panic button, kill everything. But as a supplemental sweeper that can also mill, or if you think of it in the other way, in the other direction, you could think of this as your 6 mana mill card that you're building up to, except while you're milling with it, you don't have to worry about not affecting the board in any way and taking a turn off to play a 6-drop that mills half their library, because you're also just destroying all creatures. I think when you think about it like that, it's actually really good. Like, you're still probably going to run your normal sweepers to keep creatures in check on curve, and then just view this as sort of like what you're building up to as your big win con, except when you cast it, you sweep the board again, so that you can make up for not impacting the board in any meaningful way other than milling half the deck. And that seems kind of crazy when you think about it that way. So I think mill decks are finally going to be real. This is going to be a win con that incidentally keeps the board clear for you while you're winning. And that's, I think, what mill decks want. So, man, I hate mill. I really don't want to build mill, but I think we have to. I think we're going to have to do it during early access, because I think mill is just at that point where it's too good to ignore. So, let me know in the comments if you want me to build that. I think it's going to be real. But next up, we've got Thrumming Hive Pool. The first, possibly last, but hopefully not, I hope more are coming, card that gives us Slivers in Standard. This is an artifact for 6 colorless mana, and I want to point out it is not a legendary artifact. You can have multiples of these in play. You can make copies of this if you want with things that copy artifacts. And why would you want that? First of all, this has affinity for Slivers, which in Standard is going to be super useful. You're going to need changelings, shapeshifters, or whatever if you want to get any cost reduction, which probably won't happen. But if you are looking to play your second copy of this, it might get some mana cost reduction from some of the other abilities we're about to talk about. Slivers you control have double strike and haste, just period, as static ability. But then the last line of text, at the beginning of your upkeep, you create 2 1/1 colorless sliver creature tokens. We have a sliver creature factory in Standard. Am I the only one that's excited about that? This thing comes down and spits out 2 1/1 double striking hasters every single turn. If you've had this out for 3 or more turns and you've got 6 slivers out, the next one, if you top deck it and play it, you literally play for free. And even though you're not going to get extra value off the double strike or the haste, you are going to start spitting out 4 1/1 slivers every turn that, again, are kind of hitting like they're 2/1s because of the double strike and haste, so you're swinging the turn that you make them. This just seems super awesome. I really want to use this with changelings so that we can get this out just a little bit sooner, and so that all of the changelings get double strike and haste. That seems super fun. And man, I'm just glad Slivers are back in Standard. I've missed them. I really, really hope this is a sign of things to come. I hope we got at least a cycle of other Slivers in this set. And if we don't have any more Slivers in this set, I'm crossing my fingers that at least this is a sign that maybe a set or two from now, we get more Slivers. And we get a Standard at some point that has this card in Standard with a decent enough amount of Slivers that maybe we can build a Standard Sliver deck. I know it's hoping against hope, but the potential is there. There may even be Slivers in this set still, aside from this card. We're going to have to wait and see, but I am hoping. I am crossing my fingers. Let me know if you're excited about this card and Slivers being back in Standard. Let me know in the comments. Let me know if there's anything I overlooked for synergies with this card that we should try to brew around, because I'm absolutely going to build decks with this. This just seems super fun. Next up, we have one of the last cards of the day. Not the last card, but one of them. And this is another one that was leaked a little bit early in one of the leak videos that we covered. This is Infinite Guideline Station, a 7/15 legendary artifact spacecraft for 5 mana, but it's a Wooburg, 1 mana of every color. This is a legendary 5-color artifact. When it enters, you create a tapped 2/2 colorless robot artifact creature token for each multicolored permanent you control. So you can potentially get a whole bunch of gas right out of the gate if you build the right deck around this with a bunch of multicolored permanents. But then it also stations, and when it gets to 12 plus charge counters, it turns into that 7/15 flying spacecraft that also has another ability that whenever it attacks, you draw a card for each multicolored permanent you control. So you go wide with a bunch of multicolored permanents, you drop this for 5 mana and get a free 2/2 robot for every single one of them. Then you use the robots to station this to get it to 12 plus charge counters so that you can attack in and draw at least as many cards as however many robots you made, maybe more if you played more multicolored permanents since then. There is just a ton of value built into this card. There are a hell of a lot of hoops to jump through. You need to play all 5 colors. You need to have a bunch of multicolored permanents. You're not going to want to play this in a deck that's got a bunch of colorless stuff, that's for sure, or even a bunch of monocolored stuff. You want to build this into a very specific deck that you build around it, but it's possible that deck could be crazy. I don't necessarily think we have the right building blocks for it just yet, but by the time spoiler season is over and we see what other multicolor cards are coming our way, we could possibly have what we need to make a deck like this absolutely nuts. So I'm excited to see if that's actually the case. Let me know your thoughts on this in the comments, and let me know if there's some card that we can use in conjunction with this that I'm overlooking that could just be nuts right out of the gate. I know I'm saying that for a bunch of the cards that we've spoiled today, but I wanted to get these spoilers out to you guys as soon as possible, so I didn't have a lot of time to read up on these cards and think about them before I started recording. I just wanted to make sure you got these cards in your hands, well, not literally in your hands, in your eyes, as soon as possible. So if you have ideas on stuff that I've missed or stuff we should definitely think about brewing around this card, let me know. Next up is our actual last card of the day. It's also the only mythic that was spoiled that we haven't covered yet. This is Ouroboros, not Ouroboros, an Ouroboros Boroid? An Ouroboros. This is a 1/3 plant worm for 2 green and 2, so a total of 4 mana. And at the beginning of combat on your turn, you put X +1/+1 counters on each creature you control, where X is this creature's power. This card's insane. There is a couple things I want to point out about this right out the get-go. First of all, it puts counters on itself. It doesn't say other creatures. So, at the beginning of combat, immediately the turn you play it, it turns into a 2/4. Then on your next turn, it becomes a 4/8. And then on your next turn, it becomes an 8/16. It doubles every single time. And as it doubles, it increases how many +1/+1 counters it's going to put on everything else. Sorry, I misspoke. It's not doubling its toughness. Its toughness will always be 2 ahead. But it will double its power. It will double its power every turn. And then it will also put the same amount of counters on literally every single creature you have, whether they're 1/1 crappy tokens that are now turning into like 10/10 behemoths, or whether it's a creature that's already big that's got trample and now it's even bigger. Your entire board is going wide with counters, which is nuts. I also want to point out that we've already seen a number of cards that have synergies with +1/+1 counters in this set, and that makes this card just even more crazy. And then you think about what already exists in Standard. I just got done making a really crazy Golgari Genova deck that's absolutely nuts, where we just turn it up to 11 and utilize +1/+1 counters to their max and can do some really crazy things with it. And the idea of using something like this with Genova in the same deck just gets me all sorts of hot and bothered. I think this card is insane. I think green is back. I think Golgari might be the best color combination to use this in. But who knows, by the time spoiler season is over, there could be some other crazy brew that we have in mind. But either way, I think this card is nuts. There's just so much gas for counter decks these days. Counters decks, not to be confused with counterspell decks. I think this card is poised to just do insane things. And the fact that you at least get one trigger out of it before your opponent can use sorcery speed removal means that it's not a complete whiff, even if you do play it on 4 and they end up getting rid of it. So I love everything about this card. I also love that it counts as a plant. Maybe we could build it into an Insidious Roots deck and then it's buffing up all of our plant tokens, but it's a plant itself, so it will get buffed up by the Insidious roots whenever we trigger it. That's probably another archetype we need to try to build with this. There's a lot of potential here. If there's anything I missed, just like every card I've pretty much shown you in this video, definitely let me know in the comments. I feel like there's so much we can do with this card, and I'm kind of loving it, to be completely honest. But that's going to do it for this video. That is every single official spoiler that came out for the standard legal set, and a few of the bonus sheet cards as well, on day one. Like I said before, we did do another video earlier that covered every single card that was shown off in the official debut from Wizards of the Coast. So half the cards weren't in this video, they're in that other video. If you haven't seen them already, definitely check them out. That video and all of the crazy leak videos, there's been a ton of leaks this whole week. All of that is available in my playlist, my spoiler season playlist, which I'm going to link in the description of this video, and I'm going to pin it in a comment. Check all that stuff out to stay up to date on all of the crazy spoilers, because this set is insane. And some of the stuff that was leaked that I haven't shown you in this video or the last video, it's in some of the leaked videos. Some of that stuff's even crazier than what we saw officially spoiled. There is so much insanity coming in this set. It is obviously so pushed, and I can't wait to see the rest of what's coming. I will make sure to get those videos out to you as soon as they hit. Tomorrow, we'll be back at it with more spoilers, so look forward to that, and I will see you there. Like, subscribe, do the thing. So much is on the way. I'll see you there. I'd like to thank the sponsor of today's video, Wonders of the First. Wonders of the First is a brand new collectible card game similar to games like Magic the Gathering, Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon, featuring a unique action-based resource economy that helps avoid pitfalls like Mana Flood or Mana Screw, and a battlefield containing multiple realms that unlock over time as you fight for control of the stones. The first 400 card set is called Existence, and they've even partnered with Star City Games to host their competitive play tour at every single SCG-Con event starting in August. The game contains alternate borderless art variants, as well as highly sought-after limited edition numbered prints, culminating in a one-of-one stone foil. And the best part is that the developers have a community-first approach, with a card database and deck builder available via Cardio, as well as a version of the game available on Tabletop Simulator, all for free. For more information, be sure to check out wondersccg.com today. That's wondersccg.com. Thanks so much for checking out my channel. I'd like to give a huge shout out to all of my patrons over at Patreon. Without you guys, this channel would not be possible, so honestly, thank you from the bottom of my heart for all of your contributions. If you haven't yet, like and subscribe. The more likes we get and the quicker we get them, the bigger this channel will grow and the faster it will grow. I'd love nothing more than this channel to become something very special for you guys, but it's entirely up to you how fast that happens. Also, if you'd like more deck text, that's somewhere over there. And if you'd like to see what else the channel's been up to lately, that's somewhere up that way. Also, subscribe, circle below, do all the things.